What if the biggest mistake you have ever made was, trying to find your life's purpose?
That is a heavy question to start with, but yeah, it's a profound one.
I mean, think about it for a second. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. But usually when we talk about a diagnosis or a goal, we expect total precision, right?
Right, we want a clear answer.
Yeah, like if you break your arm, an x-ray shows this jagged white line, and a doctor points to it and says, yep, there's the problem. It's totally binary, broken or not broken.
And it's visible, you can see it right there.
Exactly. And we crave that exact same clarity for our lives. We want this glowing, undeniable sign pointing to our one true calling.
But applying that mechanical expectation to your human experience usually just results in you staring at the sky.
Right, waiting for a billboard to appear.
Waiting for a billboard and then feeling completely broken when it never actually shows up.
Which is why we're talking directly to you today. Because if you are exhausted by this endless pressure to find your grand calling, it's time to just completely dismantle how we think about purpose.
The cultural noise around this is just deafening. I mean, we are constantly sold this narrative that purpose is an ultimate destination.
Like a mountain peak.
Exactly. A summit you either conquer or you die trying, leaving you as this failure.
Yeah.
But through the lens of psychology and particularly Gestalt principles, that framework is just fundamentally flawed.
So we have to basically unlearn everything we've been taught.
Yeah, we have to unlearn the idea that a calling arrives as this loud, cinematic moment of total clarity where the clouds part and everything suddenly makes sense.
I used to buy into that cinematic myth completely, honestly. Like, I spent years waiting for the clouds to part.
We all do. It's how we're conditioned.
We treat a calling like it's buried treasure. You chart out this massive, exhausting map, you sail across a metaphorical ocean, you dig up the chest, and then you can finally put, treasure hunter on your resume and feel validated.
Right, which sounds exhausting.
It is, but looking at the emotional reality of people who actually feel aligned, it seems more like, well, it's more like a heartbeat.
A heartbeat, I really like that.
Yeah, because a heartbeat isn't something you have to go out and discover. It's an autonomic process running in the background right now. You just have so much cognitive and environmental noise going on that you can't hear the bass line.
The contrast between buried treasure and a heartbeat is a perfect way to look at the underlying mechanics here. The treasure hunt implies that your purpose is external to you.
Something you have to go get.
Right, something to acquire, something the world has to validate. But the heartbeat model brings it entirely internal.
It's already there.
Biologically speaking, yes. Your autonomic nervous system is already sending you signals about what brings you alive, what drains you, and where your integrity actually lies.
But we override those signals constantly.
We ignore the heartbeat because we're looking for a spotlight. We want our purpose to be witnessed by others, yet true alignment usually looks like showing up with care when absolutely no one is watching.
Which fundamentally changes vocation from a noun to a verb, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It stops being a job title you achieve and becomes a practice you engage in.
I've been thinking a lot about this shift from the grind of, building a career to what you might call practicing devotion. And I don't mean religious devotion.
You mean devotion to the present moment.
Exactly. And it looks incredibly mundane on the outside. It's watering a houseplant and actually noticing the soil instead of scrolling on your phone.
Or writing 3 lines in a notebook that no one will ever publish.
Yeah. Or holding space for a friend who is hurting and actively suppressing your own urge to offer unsolicited advice just to fix them.
Because in those moments, you are entirely present in the here and now, which is the cornerstone of psychological grounding.
You're fully in it.
Right. You are shifting the quality of your attention. Consider a carpenter running a hand over a piece of wood. They aren't just doing it to finish a cabinet faster.
They're feeling the grain.
They're connecting with the material. Or a nurse who pauses for just 2 seconds to actually meet a patient's eyes. Not because hospital protocol mandates eye contact, but because they're acknowledging another human being.
It's about resonance, not scale.
Exactly. It's a felt, lived experience.
Okay, I need to stop you there, though, because my cynical side is flaring up just a bit.
Let's hear it.
I hear the poetry in this. I really do. Watering a plant with full attention is beautiful. Meeting a patient's eyes is deeply human. But my landlord does not care about the quality of my presence. The grocery store doesn't accept resonance as payment for eggs.
That is a very fair point.
Right. Like, if I spend my time focusing on the grain of the wood or the soil in the pot, How does that count as a life purpose when we live in a reality that strictly demands we produce and earn to survive?
It sounds like a luxury reserve for people who already have their bills paid.
Exactly. That's exactly how it feels.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because if this philosophy is only applicable to the privileged, it's practically useless. Let's look at the actual mechanism of what happens when you shift your orientation.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Nobody is suggesting you quit your job to only water plants. You are still paying the rent, you are still dealing with your boss, but the psychological load changes.
How so?
When you are constantly asking the agonizing, overarching question of, what should I do with my entire life, you are keeping your nervous system in a perpetual state of threat and lack.
Because you don't have the answer.
Right. You are burning massive amounts of cognitive energy trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle. But by shifting the question to, how do I want to be in this specific moment, you drop the cognitive load.
Oh, wow. So it's an energy conservation tactic as much as a spiritual one. You stop draining yourself with the existential dread of the future.
Precisely. You're reclaiming your attention as a rare resource regardless of the job title you hold.
So even if I'm working a job I hate, I can still do this.
Yes. The barista steaming milk with profound presence isn't doing it because making lattes is their grand cosmic destiny. They are doing it to regulate their own nervous system in that exact moment.
They're anchoring themselves.
They are refusing to let the chaos of a busy coffee shop pull them out of their own body. Vocation becomes an internal rhythm. You can work in a high-stress corporate accounting firm or a hospital and still practice this rhythm of returning to yourself.
It really is a survival tactic then. It changes the context of your life, even if the content remains exactly the same.
Exactly. The external doesn't have to shift for the internal to find peace.
That makes a lot of sense mechanically. But if finding this rhythm is ultimately just about tapping into the present moment and regulating our nervous system, why is it so universally difficult?
Oh, because we actively resist it.
We really do. We pull out our phones, we overbook our calendars, we do literally anything we can to avoid just sitting there in silence.
Because staying present requires facing the discomfort and the grief we have been very, very creatively numbing ourselves to.
Oof. The stuff we don't want to look at.
This is where we have to delve into the concept of unfinished business. So, Gestalt therapy is built around the German concept of Gestalt, which translates to shape or whole. The human brain has a biological drive to complete shapes. If you see a circle with a gap in it, your brain naturally fills in the gap.
Oh, like the Zeigarnik effect, where you remember interrupted tasks way better than the ones you finished because your brain is basically nagging you to close the loop.
Exactly that mechanism, but applied to your emotional life.
Wow, okay.
When you suppress an emotion, or when you betray your own intuition just to please someone else, you interrupt a cycle of experience. You create an open emotional loop.
And that energy just stays there.
Yes. Your organism mobilizes energy to respond to a situation, but because you suppress the response, that energy is never actually released. It stays locked in your body as tension.
I can literally feel my shoulders tensing up just talking about this.
Over years, the cognitive and physical load of carrying all these open loops just crushes you.
So when we finally sit still, the noise we hear isn't just random distraction. It's the sound of 100 open loops screaming for closure.
Yes. And closing those loops requires an immense amount of courage, because it often means admitting things we really don't want to admit.
Like realizing you're in the wrong career.
Right. Society frames the realization of, this career isn't working for me anymore, or this relationship is draining me, as a profound failure.
We feel like we messed up.
But psychologically, that admission is an act of fidelity. It is loyalty to your own organism.
Fidelity over performance. I love that. Every time you choose your own inner truth over performing for the expectations of others, you close a loop.
You refuse to repeat the past.
But getting to that point means you have to grieve, doesn't it? Like if you admit that you've been living a performance for 10 years, you have to grieve the time you lost.
You do. You can't undo the years you spent silencing your intuition. And the pain of that realization is very real.
It's heavy.
But that longing you felt, the frustration, the burnout, it wasn't a flaw in your character. It was your organism desperately reaching for wholeness. To complete that cycle, to finally close the shape, you have to allow yourself to feel the grief for the paths not taken.
I think about how often we try to spiritualize or just logic our pain away. We read another self-help book, or we try to reframe our burnout as a hustle challenge.
Anything to avoid feeling it.
Anything to avoid just sitting with the tenderness of reality. We have this deep fear of starting over and an even deeper sadness for the younger version of ourselves who honestly believed they had to earn love and safety by getting a promotion or being the perfect partner.
Rushing to solve the pain is just another form of avoidance. Completing the emotional cycle doesn't mean you achieve a state of Zen perfection.
Thank goodness, because I am definitely not there.
None of us are. It means you allow yourself to feel the fear of the unknown without letting it dictate your actions. When you feel the fear of starting over, you begin to recognize that the fear isn't a stop sign.
What is it then?
Biologically, fear is arousal. It's energy mobilizing for action. It is proof that you are finally moving towards something real rather than stagnating in safety.
That reframe changes everything. Fear is proof of movement, not a warning to turn back.
Exactly.
And once you stop betraying yourself, you stop waiting for some external authority to give you permission to live. You stop waiting to feel ready. Because readiness isn't a magical state of confidence you eventually arrive at. Readiness is just a decision to begin imperfectly.
Your calling never asks you to become a different person. It simply asks that you stop betraying the person you already are.
Which brings us to the actual physical reality of doing this tomorrow morning.
Let's get practical.
Yeah, let's say someone listening has processed this. They recognize their open loops, but they still have to wake up and navigate a world that equates their worth with their economic output. They still have an inbox overflowing with demands. How do we practically protect this internal fidelity?
You implement what we can call quiet rebellions.
Light rebellions, I like the sound of that.
These are small, deliberate countermeasures against the external pressure to perform. They aren't grand bridge-burning declarations, they are micro-boundaries.
Give me an example of the mechanics behind a quiet rebellion. How does it actually work in practice?
Imagine you are in a meeting that has run 20 minutes over. Your chest is tight, your breathing is shallow, and your body is literally signaling that it needs air.
We've all been in that exact meeting.
A quiet rebellion is standing up, politely saying, "I have another commitment," and leaving to take a walk.
Even if the commitment is just to yourself.
The commitment is to your own nervous system. Or it's noticing that a specific app on your phone leaves you feeling hollow and agitated and just deleting it.
Not posting a big announcement about a digital detox.
No, just quietly removing the source of the drain.
Or when someone asks you to take on a new project and your immediate instinct is panic, instead of reflexively saying, "Sure, I'll do it," you say, "I need time to think about this."
Because your yes is entirely meaningless if your no isn't allowed to exist.
Oh, that's good. When you set that boundary, you are doing something profound on a neurological level. You are teaching your brain that your internal signals are valid and authoritative.
Every time you honor a quiet rebellion, you wire a new pathway of self-trust.
You don't suddenly become famous or anything.
No, you don't magically land your dream job overnight. But something much more stable occurs. You begin to feel at home in your own skin. You fire the invisible jury you've been performing for your whole life.
But the nuance here is tricky, I think. From the outside, leaving meetings early, deleting apps, and saying no to projects could easily look like someone just giving up.
It could.
If I have a listener who is deeply burnt out, how do they distinguish between staging a healthy, quiet rebellion and just, checking out of their life entirely? Because depression and boundary setting can wear very similar masks.
That is a critical distinction, and you're right. The behaviors can look identical to an observer. The difference lies entirely in the internal mechanism.
Okay, walk me through that.
Giving up is a form of checking out. It's disassociation driven by apathy. You leave the meeting because you feel hopeless and devoid of energy.
Right, you just don't care anymore.
A quiet rebellion, however, is checking in. It is an active stitch in the fabric of your integrity. You aren't leaving the meeting because you don't care about your life. You are leaving because you care so fiercely about your well-being that you refuse to compromise it for a calendar invite.
Wow. Giving up is a collapse. A quiet rebellion is a boundary erected to protect something sacred.
It's active self-preservation versus passive resignation. You are trusting your inner compass.
And sometimes that compass points in a direction that terrifies you, or just confuses everyone around you.
The beautiful paradox is that the more consistently you align with that inner compass, the less you care about the question, what is my purpose?
The desperation of the search just sort of dissolves.
It does. Purpose stops being a destination you are chasing and becomes the current you are swimming in. It's a lived moment-to-moment experience.
You become the author of your own life. And I think the most subversive part of this entire philosophy is that your external circumstances might not change one bit.
They might not?
You might stay in the exact same job. You might live in the exact same apartment. But your relationship to your environment is revolutionized.
You are no longer a passenger waiting for a billboard to tell you where to drive.
Sometimes following your truth means making a massive geographic or career shift. But sometimes it just means staying exactly where you are, but finally being honest about who you are while you're there.
Honesty is the foundation. And it brings us back to the silence we discussed at the very beginning. The noise of the world demands a loud, impressive purpose.
But the reality of the human organism requires quiet alignment.
Exactly.
So if we synthesize everything we've explored today, the overarching theme is that the exhausting work of finding a calling was a distraction. It was never about discovering a label or a grand mission.
It was always about becoming the kind of person who is capable of listening relentlessly to the truth that has been whispering in your own body all along. For anyone listening who wants to move this from an intellectual concept to a felt physical reality, I strongly recommend a simple somatic check-in tonight.
Oh, I love actionable stuff. What should they do?
Before you go to sleep, lie flat. Place your hand over your heart and just feel the physical rhythm of it. Don't try to change your breathing, just observe it.
Just be with it.
Then ask yourself with a deep, genuine kindness, what part of me has been waiting to be seen?
The trick here is to bypass the intellect, right? Like, do not let your brain rationalize an answer or create a to-do list based on that question.
Yes, your brain will absolutely try to jump in with a logical response. Ignore it. Wait for the response from your nervous system.
How does that usually feel?
It might manifest as a subtle physical softening of your jaw or your shoulders. It might be a quiet, unexpected wave of emotion or a sudden flash of clarity that feels less like a new thought and more like you are remembering something you've known since childhood.
That physical response is your calling actually speaking. It doesn't arrive as a command. It arrives as an invitation to start living from the inside out.
Accepting that invitation doesn't mean you will magically have all the answers for your life. What you will have is a living question that walks beside you, continually guiding you back to your own center every time the world tries to pull you away.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to explore on your own. We've established that your true calling is simply the quality of your presence.
Right.
So picture tomorrow morning. Think about the most mundane, aggravating thing you know you're going to have to deal with.
A soul-crushing commute, maybe?
Yeah, a soul-crushing commute or a passive-aggressive email thread or a tedious conversation with someone who just doesn't listen.
The everyday stuff.
Exactly. If your calling isn't a billboard in the sky, but a quiet return to your own integrity, how might that specific, boring frustration tomorrow be the exact invitation your calling is using to ask you, finally, to show up for yourself?